We'll call the meeting to order. We'll start with roll call.
David Ferguson,
Here.
Jenny Beverly, here. Fred Stillwell,
Here.
Kellen Cronin, Jim Klepper.
We do have a quorum. Consideration of minutes from our May meeting.
I'll make a motion, we approve the minutes as presented.
Second. Okay, we'll move on to current business. But before we do that, Pat, do you mind reading?
Yes, so I mentioned this in the planning commission meeting as well. And so I believe everybody already knows this, but to the extent that you don't, I'm disclosing that I represent the county, I represent the Plan Commission Board of Zoning Appeals, but I also represent Rikers Ridge Water Company. Rikers Ridge Water Company has been involved with litigation with Sam Simons. Mr. Simons has application pending before this board for special exception. Rikers Ridge Water Company has historically provided some information and may provide information in the future relevant to the board's decision. As a current client, I have a duty of confidentiality and loyalty to both the county as well as to Rikers Ridge Water Company. And at this time, I have not identified any interests of Rikers Ridge Water Company that is adverse to the interests of the county. I have not identified any conflicts of interest. Nonetheless, I wanted to make sure that everybody knows that I represent Rikers Ridge Water Company and that I represent the county. I am not representing Rikers Ridge Water Company tonight. I'm not here to advocate on their behalf or to say anything on their behalf. And I do not believe that there's anything that poses a risk to the county or that violates the rules of professional conduct. I'm making this disclosure in part because Mr. Simons at a recent hearing asked the court to make a ruling as to whether or not I was conflicted out of the case. The court determined that I was not conflicted out of the case, and that to the extent that there was any conflict, it would be between Rikers Ridge Water Company and the Jefferson County. And again, conflicts generally mean that there is some interests that are diverged. I still have a duty of confidentiality to both the Board of Zoning Appeals as well as Rikers Ridge. I'm not going to use any information from one or the other. And again, there's no interests that are adverse to each other. So I am asking that the board just sign off on an acknowledgement that I've made this disclosure and that, to the extent that there is any conflict of interest, that it's waived. I made the same disclosure to the Plan Commission and they executed the disclosure. It's now part of the record.
Okay. We'll go ahead and start. Simons, you want to go ahead? We already have the cards from last time. Nothing's changed on that, or
He read it.
he read it, and you already went through them and we're good there. Okay.
Chairman, member of the board, staff, and council, thank you for taking your time. I know I've been before this board a number of times and everything, so I appreciate your time. I know it takes a lot of time to do these meetings. So what I thought I'd do is this is kind of the outline. What I'd like to do is kind of review the special use exception why we're here. I'll go through the prior hearings, just very high level, the scope of the permits. We'll talk about some definitions that I think are critical for the board to hear. I'll give an update on fire compliance, E911 addressing, discussion about what is permanent structures, the RV park models, the boundary fencing issue, which has come up a number of times, the boundary marking, water status, and then invite the board. You're welcome to come out if you so fit. Before you vote, or you're welcome to come out to see, because we're really talking a facility that's getting close to done. We still have some work to do on the driveway to meet fire code and some of the work with our water. We'll talk about that. So I'm going to head out. I know some of you were at the last meeting, so I got 3 extras here. I think some of you are coming, but I thought this first handout is this here on the left hand side. These are verbatim quotes. This document here that says Sam Simons Lost Trail conditional use person status as of June 2025. But before I do that, I just want to I have a question just to make sure I understand exactly what's happening. So we had the planning commission had heard the violation revocation request. And so as I understand it, and I'm just trying to get confirmed that as I stand here, the conditional use permit that was granted in September 2021 is in full enforcement effect. And so what we're asking here tonight, this special exception is that would be applicable to transfer it to Lost Trails. And I read I'm asking that, so if the property doesn't go transferred to Lost Trails, my conditional use permit stays in effect, is that correct?
The conditional use permit that was previously authorized by the Board of Zoning Appeals remains in full force and effect. My understanding is that you have made an application for a special exception before the Board of Zoning Appeals, and that part of that application involves having the name applied in a different way. And so this board is going to be just considering your application for special exception.
Well, so my question is, if it's denied, the conditional use permit stays in effect, correct?
That's correct.
And if it's approved, it's applicable to the Lost Trails. I mean, the whole purpose of this is to transfer it. Let's say, again, I have a family and all that, and I know that if it's not transferred to Lost Trails, my conditional use permits remains in effect. Is that correct? Cause that whole purpose.
If you don't change the name, it has to stay in the original name.
Exactly, that's my point.
That the one.
It'd be up to the plan commission to determine whether or not there'd been a violation of the zoning ordinance or the conditional use permit. But I mean, the answer to the question is currently you have the conditional use permit. You've made an application for a special exception. This board will consider the special exception, will either approve or deny it.
But if it's approved, the conditions apply to the Lost Trails entity when it's transferred. Let's say it doesn't get transferred.
Oh, you're asking about ownership.
That's the
So
condition. Yeah,
that-
because the whole purpose is the ownership change. That's what was the purpose of the filing.
Hold up, what do you keep asking about the conditions?
Well,
I believe that the question is that because he's applying in the name of Lost Trails LLC, that in the future, if the ownership of Lost Trails LLC were to transfer to someone else, that Lost Trails LLC would be able to continue to use the special exception. Is that what you're asking?
well, the question is, my question is, I have to the special exception is applicable to the transfer to Lost Trails.
The special exception is an application for a special exception use on that property.
Okay,
And you're making that application in the name of yourself and Lost Trails.
so
I think what he's asking is, it is in the name of Sam Simons, right?
yeah, but if it's.
And it's approved in that name. If we don't approve it, will he still have it in that name? I think. is that
Conditional
what
use
it-
permit?
Yeah,
The plan commission did not revoke the conditional use.
No, here's my question. So again, it's a family LLC, right? So, again, a lot of things have happened and those of you at the planning
Let's
commission.
let's call it new and whatever, you're,
Okay.
I know a lot has changed, but let's just use the name the current one's in,
Right.
the one that that you have in place. And then you have a new one that you're wanting to, so there's two that you're talking about correctly, right? Currently.
Yeah,
So you're asking if we deny the one that we're looking at tonight, will the old one stay in effect? Is that what you're asking?
the question is, the LLC is myself and again, I want to have.
The current one, or right, or this
The LLC.
application?
Yeah, that's on the application. Now, we have an agreement amongst ourselves that we'll transfer, it, but as a group and the entity may say, whatever conditions get on there, we don't want to accept it, just keep it Sam and just spend the rest of your life and you own it. And, my question is, in that case, because again, I don't, again,
If we approve one, does the other one get revoked?
Does the approval of the special exception of the
If
property?
this one, if this one that's in front of us now, and we approve it, what's that do with the old one that we just heard in the planning commission?
Oh, it would, yeah, no, so the special exception would be the current permit on the property. The conditional use permit would no longer.
So he's asking if we put conditions on this application in front of us, and he doesn't like them, can he just go back to the old one?
Oh, no.
well, so the whole purpose, so I mean, I'd like to just withdraw the application. Because I have an entity, my family, who's gonna wants to be able to take over this, and we wanna run with it, but if the conditions are so onerous, my kids and my family, they say, keep it dead. We don't want it. It's a contract situation, right? It's just like I couldn't transfer the property because I had a violation filed.
So,
And so this is for the Lost Trails, and this application is for the Lost Trail. I signed off on the amended one just because you require the property owner to be.
so what name's it in now? Currently today, and that's what the old application's in?
The original
Yes.
application. when I-
So it's in the one that's in effect now.
Is that his name?
It's in that name now,
Same sign.
and that's what it is today.
Yes, everything's in my name today. And,
Well, I can't give you legal advice, but the plan commission just held a hearing. And the key issue that they just held was that they did not they determined, well, they did not make a determination that you had transferred the property to a different owner. And as a result, did not proceed with violations on the conditional use permit. So I can't give you legal advice, but of course, if you in fact transfer the ownership of the property to another owner, then at that point in time, the planning commission could take up whether or not you've now violated the conditional use permit by not seeking a new application.
so this, but what this application, the whole purpose of this application is to transfer it to an entity. That, I had to unwind the situation because of the violation allegation, got it back there, but
So
the
what,
point is that the LLC, if there's conditions put on this thing that are so onerous that the LLC says we're not.
if we approve it, then you have to abide by it and the old one goes away. You can't pick and choose which one of the two you want.
Then
So you either we go through this and and if we accept it and we then you have, the old one's gone. You cannot get it back. Once we make a decision,
well,
but if we turn it down, you still have the old one. So that's your choice.
If you subsequently then transfer the ownership of the property to someone else, where it's no longer in your control, where you're no longer the owner of the property, then that would be a violation of the conditional use
say
permit.
that again, I'm sorry.
If the ownership is transferred to someone other
Yes,
than you,
understand.
that's a
Yes.
violation of the conditional use permit.
So.
You would have to leave it in your, whatever name it is now, you would have to stay there forever.
Exactly, and so upon my death, is that a transfer?
It is, yes.
Okay, all right, well, let's move on. So what I handed out is, on the left-hand side, I didn't want to hand it because you're gonna get a ton of paper, but on the left side, I thought it would be an opportunity to show what the original.
I'm sorry, I have to interrupt you real quick, Mr. Simon. So you made a request to withdraw your
I'm sorry.
application? You're not withdrawing your application?
I should say, I'll keep the application going, let's go
Okay.
ahead and have this.
Okay.
I'm sorry, I apologize.
No, it's all right. I just wanted to make sure the record was clear.
So on the left-hand side, that's quoted out of the original conditional use permit, and I thought what would be helpful for the board is to take a look at what the exact language was in there and then kind of give a current status. So, because this property had multiple, there are 3 buildings on it at the time of this zoning approval. The first one that I pulled off was the existing metal building that's currently used to store maintenance equipment occupied by property managers. That's language right out of the permit. And then over on the right, the current status is it's no longer occupied by property management. The water has been shut off. And the plans are to renovate this building. And probably do with this year, that's about it.
Can I don't wanna mess you completely up and can you just? I'm afraid we're gonna muddy the waters by talking about the past.
Okay,
I think we just need to talk about the current, what we're actually looking at. And then we can move forward. And if we got questions about the past, we'll ask them. I mean, is that all right, board?
and I appreciate that. No, I want to be as streamlined as.
Cause all we can really consider is what's the application in front of us, what happened in the past. We can talk about, but we got new ordinances you'll have to follow. And, they are different than what the old permit's under. So we gotta make sure, that that these are all, that I have in my hand, all are met with this new application.
So the question I have is, again, if there's a structure that's built, it's because it's all the structures are there and you have different requirements as to spacing. Am I gonna have to change it? Seems to me that'd be considered a non-conforming use, would it not? I mean, these structures are all built.
You're
and I know-
asking about setbacks?
Well, I know there's some different dimensional requirements for campground that might be different. than what it was when this was built.
Yeah.
What structures are you
I think we
saying?
talked about the spacing last time of the cabins, how far they're apart, all of the lots, but it's.
Yeah.
I mean, I would tend to agree that things that have already been built pursuant to the prior conditional use permit are, excuse me, are now non-conforming uses that are
Okay,
allowed under the new UDO.
okay, that's fair. So I want to talk about, so under the code, we're gonna be talking about, we have 6 RV sites on the property that are constructed, 4 of which have park model RVs. And I have a brochure, I'll take mine with me, but these are by statute, they have to be 400 square feet or less. And then there's the brochure if you want to pass it around. And so they're RVs, and the original.
So real quick, you have you're gonna have 4 RVs, and then how many campsites?
2,
4 and 2,
that's 6.
okay.
And then there's the existing cabin that was approved under, it was a renovated cabin, but it existed at the time.
But that's not anything that has in the front of the road.
I'm
So
sorry.
the structure you have in at the beginning of the
No,
property.
that that's a metal building, and I think we said in the original zoning that it would eventually someday it would probably be like an office and storage. That's the only plan. There's not gonna be a resident in it. If there had been a property manager apartment in there at the time I bought it, and it stated, but it's done. I mean, there's no kitchen facilities. The water's been disconnected from that building. So it's a building that's gonna be storage and maybe repurposed to an office. And I'd like to have the special, I'd like to have it approved to have, potential office.
Do we have, is it in the application now? Is, as far as does it say office, or did you put that in there in your drawing?
I think it's, I'm not sure if I did, I don't have one second.
But the last dimension. And this.
Yeah, okay, yeah, I didn't have it there. So that's it.
So which one of these is the,
It would be the,
First one, overland storage, possible future campground, office, possible residence, garage and storage.
so we got too many possibles on there,
well,
because if, we can't have a possible residence.
What's it sound like?
That's what I'm looking at on 40, your, garage and storage.
okay, that could be stricken. I don't intend to have a residence in it. Okay.
But it's not in the application itself. As a residence. And what does that structure have? It's the one right when you first pull on the property up here.
This is in the application, so this is the detailed description of the request. We can hold a second. The first one, which is the one that. This is legal. With the first application.
Yeah. So maybe this might help,
Under
maybe this might
the
help.
original application, it was in imminent life, so, right? The first one,
When you say the first application, what do you mean?
the first application that in 2021, and then when it started.
Yes, that's correct.
That's the one that's. in
But it
the
actually
back.
started
And
before.
the cheap, why is it?
So maybe let's do,
He
I'll have
transferred it,
three
transferred it
handouts
to
there.
What it was in 2020,
So-
he's put it back.
So there's, so again, now that, I apologize. So what he passed out, this is the survey file of the property, the top one is, what the original conditional use permit, that doesn't only exist, so let's take a look at the second one, because I think that might help us on the residents. Well, because, well, so the reason I want to point to this, to answer your question about the residents. I think it's something that would be allowed just as of right. For example, the dark piece is where my current residence is. That's a separate parcel. In land, separate tract of lands. It has a residence. The remaining 40 acres, as I understand your code. There could be a residence. It could be that property, could be built, but this. And again, my understanding would be that I would be entitled at some point in the future, build a residence on this residual 40-acre tract of land. I don't think I need zoning approval for that. I'm not saying I want this.
So there's
building,
two tracks, correct? There's one with your house on it.
Yes, the small.
And then this, and the one where the campground is going.
Yes, which includes this metal building.
Right, but
So-
but the application doesn't have that part of the,
Okay, so,
so we've got to clean that up, because I don't want down the road, we have these campsites and then all of a sudden, 2 years from now, we have another campsite up next to the road or whatever, or someone living there,
so
when
let's,
we didn't agree to that.
so let's just leave it as a residence. I designated it because I'm entitled to one, again, help me out in the agricultural district. I'm entitled to, for residents, and I'm just saying, then it's something you don't have to worry about from the zoning board. This building could be repurposed to a residence someday. It's not now, indeed.
Right, but we got to look at what could and couldn't be. It has the bathroom, it has everything in it,
Yeah.
correct?
But I'm just saying, if you want that taken out, residents out, because I don't need zoning approval for that, do I?
If it's part of this they need it.
If it changes the conditions on what we approved, I would say yes.
Under our current zoning ordinance, individual parcels are allowed a single family dwelling.
So. Since
If
he
he's-
deeded that one off, this would be the single dwelling on this campsite, would that still be that way?
He's indicating that there are two parcels and therefore an approved use would be a single family dwelling. That's an approved use under our ordinance for each of those parcels. Presuming the parcels meet all the other requirements.
That's what I was just gonna ask you,
But then changing the rest of the parcels to a campground though?
So my understanding, he's already begun construction of a campground on one of the parcels. And he is here seeking special exception to be able to continue with campground, but in different names.
but what about so he's talking about everything that's going on behind this, the back part of this. That's what the application is about, the campgrounds part of it, but on that same parcel, they have this structure in the front. Doesn't it have to be identified? Since it's all on that parcel, or how are we looking at this? Are we only looking at the structure, or are we looking at the whole parcel as far as the approval for the
The application was to amend and add in that other parcel. That's what this application is. This amendment is to add the other parcel into the condition, which would be the campground. Right?
So the campground, under the prior ordinance, was a conditional use and
For
is currently
40
a
acres.
special exception use. So it's a special type of use. There are permitted uses that exist on those properties that are not conditional or special exception uses. One of those uses is single family residence. So single family residence is a permitted use on those parcels. And so my understanding is that his application does not have to do with the construction utilization as single family residence, but has to do with specifically his request to utilize the
Okay.
property under a special exception for campground. I mean, certainly it's something you can take into consideration what the current use of the property is, but I would agree that I don't think he needs a special exception.
Is it
for a
permitted
residential
for
use.
residents now? Josh, do you know?
What's that?
The existing, is it permitted now?
It's a permitted use, what
I mean,
Josh
has
asked,
it-
whether there's a building permit.
Yes, that's what I meant. Is there a building permit and do we know that?
On the original,
The house next to, or the building up front?
and I don't know.
It's an existing structure that's been there for how long?
Yeah, it's been there for quite some time.
So having if it was built before he owned it or not, and if it wasn't right or wrong, and he doesn't have a building permit, that's still okay?
It doesn't have a building permit for the structure
Yeah.
out on the road.
Yes.
That building, whether or not the building permit has been issued for that, would be, so what, so for enforcement purposes, it would be required to determine when the building was put in place and what the zoning requirements were at that time, and whether or not the installation of that building met those zoning requirements at that time. The county has not received a complaint that there is some zoning violation with the
Right.
erection of that structure.
So we need to focus just on the campgrounds itself, that, since he's saying that's gonna be a residence, it's now not an office, because originally he was saying it was potentially gonna be an office for the campgrounds. That,
So one of the distinctions I think Mr. Simons is making is that originally, when the application came before the Board of Zoning Appeals, it was all one parcel.
Mhm.
And at that time, only one single family residence would have been allowed on that parcel. He had an intent and did in fact construct his own residence further back on the parcel with the black boxes now. So he would not be allowed to have two single family dwellings on one parcel, but he has now divided the property into two parcels. And his position is that he would be allowed to have a single family dwelling on each of those two parcels.
okay.
Am I correct, Mr. Simons?
Exactly.
I just don't, I don't wanna, I'm gonna be very. We're gonna nail this down. There's no gonna be what if this or that. I'm just gonna be honest with you. And so what happens, and I'm like, if down the road, this happens to turn from a residence, which is claims to be what he's thinking, and turns into an office for the campgrounds. Does that, where are we at with that? Do we put a condition that that can't happen because he is claiming it to be a residence? Or how does that change the what we're looking at as far as the application is concerned? You know, am I explaining that right?
If I understand your question, you're asking, so if he is declaring it as a residence now, and later were to convert the use of it to a part of the campground as a campground office, would that be a violation of the ordinance? That's a hard question. I mean, I would have to dig further into
Would
the
it be,
ordinance, but
if
it
we
would
put a
be,
condition that that couldn't happen?
I mean, you can put reasonable conditions on the.
I mean, I'm just saying, I'm just asking, I just don't wanna be told one thing and the intent, about a year or so down the road is something different.
I mean, yes, I mean, like, so you can put reasonable conditions on special exceptions. So if the board determines that that is reasonable or necessary for, for maintaining the, comprehensive plan, maintaining, the use of the property, then that is a condition that you could place.
Sorry about that. I just wanted to make sure we're all on the same page to the T, and I want you to know where we're at and where you're at, and so
Well, we had a new site development plan to show how everything's gonna lay on this one.
the only thing I've gotten, is this right here.
I think there was a sketch in the package, but everything's built, so I didn't really.
You did, yeah.
I have the old one. I don't think I have a new one. Was the one last year?
That's what we're wearing. I do have something to do with the.
Okay.
I do have something there that will be helpful. I think it is on there.
This is all the cases.
That's this is in color. So there should
This
be
is all
enough.
the paperwork.
So,
So has your site plan changed any from your last meeting?
no, so what you have here,
Are these two different
this,
things?
these little numbers on here that correspond
Same thing.
to the E911 that was prepared by Brandon Company. So, and he went out and per the last meeting we had on this application, there was someone that came up and said for emergency services, we'd like to have those spots assigned an E911 address. So, Brandon was great to work with. He came out and walked the property and he located them to the best, he walked this property and those are the addresses. And we'll talk a little more.
Real quick while you're on that, are you gonna have those, displayed in front of each each of the campgrounds?
So the answer is gonna be, things have changed since then, so. Again, we may have to bounce, but we'll stay on topic. So the E911 was, we were in response to that, and I did
Right.
that, right? So. When I filed litigation with Rikers Ridge. Part of the, one of the correspondence from Rikers Ridge was that as a result of these 10 E911 addresses, I had 10 lots. And they wanted me to run 10 water lines. And so.
10 meters, you
10
mean?
meters wide water lines. And so, I went back to Brandon and I said, well, you know, if there's an entity out there that can interpret E911 addressing as a lot for water purposes. So he went back, and I'll hand out this letter he just sent me a couple days ago. So
We don't say, they're saying that the having a 911 address is considered a lot, is that we can get from the county, we can get a 911 address for anything, can't we? So I could just say, I got a driveway, I could ask for a 911 address for that through the county.
But one way or another, Rikers Ridge's determinations of what constitutes what is not.
Right,
binding on
no,
this
I'm
board.
just asking a
This,
question.
this board is bound by your own definition. of
Right.
an ordinance, yeah.
But
I'm not 100% sure what the rules are on getting an address.
okay,
So
Let's
let's look,
get them on anything.
so
we
we
could-
just get any, like if I wanted
Yeah, that helps them identify a structure where it's
to,
at.
or anything.
There has to be a.
Our
structure.
ordinance does
Yeah,
um,
Piece of burns.
give definitions for lots and
I think this
parcels in there.
Ours does,
Yeah.
Yes,
okay.
and I
Okay, so
think,
this, I think this letter from Brandon explains it, what he can and cannot do. I'd like to just go ahead and go through it. So he said, per your request, I reverted the changes back to, basically, we're gonna have two numbered, structures out there. This metal building is gonna be 4,004, and my residence could be 4,012. These other 8 ones have gone away. And he went around and looked at all the campgrounds in the county, and let me read, so he says, as far as separate listing, there's not any other examples in Jefferson County where this is it, and he said, one example I looked at in the city of, Madison Campground, it has one number for the entire parcel. We do not delineate sites, units, or lots. And then he went to Cliffy State Park and another Madison out there on East 56. And you can read through it, and he says that he absolutely cannot assign E911 aggregate consistent allowance, and something they can do, and that's what, and so we did everything we could, so we.
Hold on. Matt True, the head of the EMA, said, so you're saying, Brandon's saying, and what's his title?
He's the executive director for 911.
And he's saying that you cannot have 911 addresses like in your lot, or in your campgrounds, not yours.
Here's the, here's the email.
Josh, Sandy Beach has separate addresses for all those trailers out there.
That surprises me, because
I do
that's just
believe
the
that they do.
GPS coordinate.
I do believe that Sandy Beach does, but I had been talking to Brandon some about this. The addresses are off of Old State Road 62, which in my personal opinion is very confusing. If you're driving a fire truck or an ambulance and you have a coordinates that is farther down the road of Old State Road 62, and none of these cabins are located on Old State Road 62. They're actually back, whatever you want to call it, Mr. Simon's driveway, the lane that goes back there.
So, yeah, the people might
discussed
think
that-
it would be further down.
Well, I discussed with him that maybe they should address
His
the
road.
driveway. And if they wanted addresses on each individual building, then they should name that lane as a private lane or a private drive.
Whatever,
and
whatever
put
that is,
addresses,
you could just make that a,
Lost Trails Lane or whatever, and put, or what I think would be really clear is address the lane, the end of the lane where it's at. And as you drive back, have A, B, C, D, or 1, 2, 3, 4, and have them clearly labeled on every cabin.
don't you have a problem with that if we had that road, your driveway as named as a road?
But, well, I don't know, I mean, that brings into, again, I don't want that to be a public road, it's a private campground.
It would have to be a private lane if you did that, I
I
think.
just don't wanna have it thought that people think.
Well,
that's a
there's,
road. I think-
well, you put, the sign would say private lane, but it'd be called Sam's or whatever, a private road, but
I mean, I don't know,
But for safety reasons, they need to be clearly labeled.
somehow we gotta identify it because, and I agree with Matt, if we have a medical emergency and you call 911, somehow when they pull in that driveway, they gotta know where to go. So that was my thing with Matt, was, and I agreed with him, we need to identify that clearly, night, day, or whatever. And that's where 911 came about, so if somehow we've got to be able to identify this, because you go back here tonight, you know, and and you're supposed to go, how are they gonna identify that?
I mean, he mentioned 4 campgrounds. He checked in with other.
Well, we're gonna be progressive, we're gonna be the first
Well,
here, so,
I mean, I don't know how much.
the only other
I
thing
get
that was
everything I
brought
did.
up.
So you're putting me in a catch-22, so I did what was asked, I thought. hey,
No,
can live with
I
it.
agree,
And
I'm
then-
not saying
And then you
that,
have an entity out there that interprets that under their regulations. For water services by calling that, so I think.
well, we're not worried, you got your own water services.
But that's not, no, but I was forced to do some, this has cost me significant amounts of money to do things.
I
And I would
understand.
just soon withdraw my application right now, just table it, and I'm happy to live it the rest of my life and let my children and somebody else. Because I'm not gonna go do stuff. I went to the emergency 911 and I got forced into drilling a water well because of that reaction from it. I know it's a private entity, I know they're not a regulatory agency, but I was forced to drill a well because of what happened. And so I want to withdraw my application. I'm done. I'm done.
Okay. All right. Well, what's next on the agenda?
The changing of
We have to do it in. New business, as you guys know, it affects us more than anybody, because we send out the cards. 10 days it's been rubbing, I mean, it's really getting too tight on the day. So we've asked, for a 15-day notification. And, with the planning commission, we don't really, do we need to make a motion here too?
Yeah.
Both board?
Yeah, because you're changing your rules and regulations too.
Okay.
I'll make a motion. Accept it.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Okay,
One thing before we adjourn.
yeah, I'm not to that. Hold on real quick though. We still got a little bit. I want to talk more, but we'll get with you. Is there anything else that you guys have? Next meeting is, do we have, they'll be here for us.
Yeah, so far we haven't met the deadline for the next month's meeting, but I don't have anything on the schedule. As I'm doing.
Well, I really don't want to say all this stuff, but I'm gonna say it, because I've been sitting here listening to this stuff for a long time. And I'm shocked that I was at those meetings when this thing was originally approved, and I know what was said, and I know what was supposed to be in the conditional use permits, and it was not put down correctly. So there's something wrong with that, and then when you bring this up, the stuff that was actually said at that meeting, and say that if you did not comply with those things, then it's a technicality. Oh, it's never gone into the meeting, never done this, never done that. And I just think it's really unbelievable. And then his tirade up here, because you're asking him questions about things that you want to see. You want to try to do it right this time, if there need to be conditions and things, because it's always a moving ball, always a moving ball. So I don't know.
I can understand. I mean, I mean, I do. We had those discussions I was on the BZA. I'm the only one here that you can really yell at here. And we had discussions and we thought, and we missed the boat. We didn't get the clarity. We make a statement and he agrees and you think things are gonna happen the way they are, meeting the neighbors. In the minutes, we didn't have our Al, to have it. So some of the minutes were handwritten and it just didn't happen the way what it should have. So, and there's nothing we can do about it other than what you've already tried to do in the planning commission. But unfortunately, the way that worked was they can only go by what was in the paper, which your problem is. It's what's not in the paper that on that conditions that you're upset with, and I understand that. I don't know what else to tell you other than I agree with you.
I've just had a hell of a civics lesson. Because we did everything, tell you, apply, or, you know, come to the meeting, say what you think. It's supposed to be taken down correctly, didn't take it down correctly, doesn't do what he says he's gonna do. And you try to bring that up, oh, that wasn't written down. Just can't do about it, so good luck. Good luck.
I'd like to respond. I think.
Hold on, he had his hand up first, and we'll get back to you, Sam.
I'm sorry.
Go ahead, Dave.
I don't wanna get anybody upset, take either side. What Matt was getting at, I believe. Sam is calling it, what do you call it, Sam, lost trails? Your campground is lost trails, correct?
Well, first,
What, all right,
Whatever it's called, it's called.
whatever it's called. What Matt was trying to say. So if the 911 address is 4004, I believe, okay?
right,
And they call it in. 911, Brandon's dispatchers gets it, they page the ambulance or they page the fire. If it's at cabin number 1, which we like say the first cabin, if he numbers it, he could say. We're at 4004 Old State Road 62. Lot 1, cabin 1, whatever he wants to call it, lot A, cabin. That is what Matt was trying to say, so that when we know, or the ambulance knows, when we pull in that road, we know we gotta make a hang a right or left, get down that lane, and we get back there and we see, like, especially if it's an ambulance, there's nothing outside that's gonna tell them what's happening. But if there's a 1 or an A or whatever denoting that spot where that camper is, or his little log thingies, whatever he's wanting to call them, or whether it's at the back at the Airbnb, if they each one has a letter or a number assigned to it, along with his street address, then the ambulance would know where to roll to. And the fire would, because a lot of times we get one, it's a smoke detector. You get there, there's nothing going on.
You can't see anything from the
You
outside.
can't see nothing. But if it says it's lot A or lot 1 or whatever, we know which one to pull up. I
Right,
think that's what Matt was trying to get.
Yes.
Sam sort of misunderstood, and he went and got the 911 addresses, which kind of muddied it all up. But I think that's what Matt was.
yeah,
trying to say.
they just need identification, so if an ambulance comes up, it either has to be a well-lit sign.
Yeah.
Identified, and at each campsite, a well-lit or identified there that matches what's on the sign, yes, and 911.
So the address is for whatever, then you go back there, and
Yeah.
each site would have its own number.
Cause you don't know if the person's gonna be outside to flag them
Right.
in, or they might be with the person in distress inside and not realize.
Right.
Yeah,
I think that's what Matt was trying to,
yeah, and that's what I was trying to get.
and I think there was a misunderstanding or what he was trying to say.
I think he was going overboard, which that's what we would want to
Yeah.
get the 911 and an identification, but there's other alternatives to that identification.
Right. But that's all I got to say on that.
Yeah, thank you, Dave.
so I'd like to respond to both of those, so I'll do the last one first, because, yeah, I'll do whatever. Even though I withdraw my application, I'll do whatever, if someone can help God, if the fire department, if anyone comes up with a plan, I'm willing to go. Like I said, I spent a lot of time with Brandon out there, and he thought he came up with a solution that would work. I thought it would work. I was willing to go with that approach and having all those different addresses. We renumbered everything. I thought seemed like a perfect one. You could put it in his system and it would be precise. And our plan was, which the brochures that we're preparing for these rentals, we would let people know if you do E91, this is the address. It's not a mailing address because these are 14-day rentals. We were willing to do all of that in our rentals to do that. So if someone wants to push that, I'm willing to cooperate with whether it's Matt or someone through Brandon, but I'm just showing everything I did. I thought I did everything in good faith. And then I got hit with,
Well, you're not, my point was, you're not doing anything with Rikers Ridge anymore, but we, no matter what our application, we would have wanted some identification, because it makes perfect sense. I know Clifty doesn't do it or whoever else, but Matt brought up a good point. And somehow, if we couldn't do 911, which I still like Josh's idea, but we have to have that identified. And I think going forward, with what you've got in place now, you still need to do that to make everybody feel comfortable with that.
And I sincerely want that, because I don't want a disaster back there, and I don't want anybody to have a situation where any of these horrible events could happen, so that if someone can help me, pave the path, I'm certainly willing to work with them. As I said, I went through a lot of time to redo that. It blew up in my face, with the water situation, but, so enough said there, but let me talk about, because this boundary situation, and again, because I'm committed to be a good neighbor and everything, but I think we need to walk through a couple items here and respond to Mr. Newell. So right after the meeting last week, so on April 7th, there's the certified receipts. You know, pass around the board. I sent to all my neighbors. Carved out. Like to pass the letter around. I sent a certified mail letter to all my neighbors. John was on the list. He signs on the card.
This is April 7th of this year.
This year, so again, I want to solve, I'm a problem solver. So I opened up a window and said, let's walk, and so three of my neighbors did walk properties and everything, and it was crickets from Mr. Newsom, so. But let's talk a little bit about what the property, this purple marking is, so you understand why the dilemma in dealing with someone like Mr. Newsom. So the law says the mark, agricultural property mark purple markings up and down the tree. And that requires, so trees aren't exactly in the boundary, so Mr. Musil is obligated to mark the trees on his property that face my property, so if someone walks up to that, that's the boundary, his tree has to, I can't go on his property, I'd be trespassing, and the same on mine. So,
Did your other three neighbors do that?
I mean,
You said three neighbors showed up.
the only one did was the new.
Did you mark that? Did they mark theirs or did anything?
We went out there and there was one spot that they marked on there, because there's a trail of mine that goes up to his property. Let me, Dr. Ball. He has 80 acres behind him.
Yeah.
But, no one that has rural property, but I'm willing to do that, but it's gonna take two of us, and I think when that meeting, you know, minutes don't capture everything, but if I recall back in that one, I think we kind of talked about it, that it's gonna require each property owner to go out, because I can't mark the tree on his property. I'm not gonna say where his boundary is, so, so this is the letter, and I'm still willing to do it if he wants to call me. But the second portion.
The thing is, so on the identification, you can go out and do that even without him there
On my trees.
on your trees. Have you done that?
Well, the reason is I'm not worried about it.
Well, but to be a good neighbor, you need to. So if I'm in your campsite and I'm in there, I need to know where your property ends.
Well,
And I think if a good neighbor, you would go mark everything on your side of that.
so I have a better solution, and so we talked about this back in 2019. And so
Make a motion.
the solution is
Real quick, hold on.
is the boundary law. I've initiated some preliminary discussions with the township trustee, Madison Township, Mr. Fry. And so the solution is the boundary fence.
I'm very familiar with that.
So my solution is to be the good neighbor. I'm willing to hire my fence person, and I'll do my 50%, and Mr. Mutual can do the same. And I'm offering that to any of my neighbors. If they're not happy the way I mark my property, or they're marking their property, because he's concerned about people running on his property, and it would have to be him to say where the boundary is. Since he's unwilling to do that, I'm gonna work through the Madison Township trustee, he's got the jurisdiction over this. And we're gonna do a petition fence, so that'll be that's maybe my commitment.
No, I agree with that. I think that would be a smart thing to do.
So,
There's state law that protects that.
pardon me?
That's their state law that's for that reason. Everything.
Exactly.
Well, you've pulled your application. I just kind of want to let everybody speak. So I think unless you're gonna put another application, I think we're done. But I would recommend that you've heard a lot of things said in these last two applications that didn't go anywhere, to follow through with putting something up there to identify your campsites. And to follow through on the property lines. Either of some sort. That would be my two biggest recommendations.
Make a motion, we adjourn.
Between our property.
All right, ready?
But you're saying you wanna go with the between our body.
Yes.
I second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Yes.
Get out of here.